church, everybody. If you know, would y'all help me say it? Water you turned into wine. Hey, there's. Come on, everybody in the building, raise this hand. It's none like you. Into the darkness, take. Out of the ashes we rise. There's no one. Come on, raise it up, everybody, raise it. It's none. Come on, let's put it together as a family. Our God is greater. Our God is greater. Stronger. Our God is stronger. God, you are higher. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer. Our God is healer. He's awesome in power. Our God. Our God. Our God is greater. Say. Our God is greater. Stronger. Our God is stronger. God, you are higher. Our God is healer. He's awesome in power. Our God. Hey, and if our God is for us, then who? And if our God is wisdom, what can stand? And if our God is for us, then who? And if our God is wisdom, what can stand? And if our God is for us, then who? And if our God is wisdom, what can stand? And if our God is, then who? And if our God is wisdom, what can?
Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, praise the Lord. Good evening, everyone. Amen. We're going to give you a few moments to start a watch party with us. Invite your family and your friends as we talk openly about social matters that are happening in our world today. I'm happy to have with us again on our Nights of the Round Table. We have Mayor Ricky Thomas. We have Pastor Wesley Dent. We have our moderator, Elder DJ Thompson. And we have our other participant, person of Deacon Carlos Reed Sr. And tonight we want to continue our discussion about social justice, social injustice, police brutality. And I know that we are going to have a lot of interaction today, and we're hoping that you are able to watch. And if you have questions, go ahead and send them in. We'll be watching our YouTube stream and our Facebook stream. If you have questions that you want the moderator to ask, or if you need more depth of information of what we're sharing today, please indicate that in your comment section. Just a little note for everyone. We want you all to remain safe. Make sure you're practicing social distancing. You'll see on the stage now that all of us have on our mask, and we're not in the direct air pathways of each other, and we're doing our best to stay healthy so that we can continue this worthwhile discussion. All right, with that being said, before we go any further, I'd like to just have a moment of prayer. Since we are in God's house, let's have a moment of prayer. So if you will, just bow your heads with me as we pray. Most righteous and kind God, we thank you for all your many blessings. We ask you to bless this meeting of the round table, these nights of the round table. God, we help that through this interaction that we will get more clarity, more understanding, and above all, perfect your will in the earth. We ask you to bless these participants and all those that are watching. We ask these in Jesus' matchless name. And everyone said, amen. All right, we're going to begin. We're going to turn it over to our moderator, Elder DJ Thompson.
Hey, good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing this evening?
Doing well, doing well.
Good, good. So we want to jump right into our discussion, but I first want to thank our pastor for giving us this platform, this opportunity to bring awareness to some issues that I feel are very much needed in today's time. As the world is changing, the church dynamic is changing. It's good to see our pastors well, we should see our pastors in a different light, a more diverse light. So thank you, Pastor, for this opportunity. And shout out to Resurrection Church of L.A., Pastor Joseph Robinson as well, for his mentorship and things of that nature. But I want to jump right in. I want us to continue this unpacking the trauma and addressing some of the issues that pertain to the current events. So my first question that I want to ask the panel is there a difference between white Democrats and white Republicans? Is there a difference? And I'll go to why I asked that question first. But do any of you guys want to kind of tackle that?
I think that answer may be individualized. It may depend on the individual. You know, if a person's heart is not right, as far as doing good by the people, whether they're Democrat or Republican, they need to have a makeover. They need a change. So we've got to look for who best serves us. And so once we look at that individual and we see what that individual stands for, now we know normally the Republicans are considered the party of the rich, of the well-do. And that normally the Democratic Party is the party of helping people. And so it is a difference, party-wise, as far as what they stand for. If you look at some of the things that our president is putting out, and then you look at his loyal people, they're afraid to come out against them. And so, and that's because they're trying to maintain the sake of the party.
Yeah.
And if you really, really look at the Democrat and the Republicans normally won't go against each other. They stand firm, and they don't care who like it, who suffer, or whatever. They're going to stick with their party. The Democrats tend to fight for something that whatever they think is right or what they believe in. So that's why when Bill Clinton was president, when he had a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate, they were going against him sometimes. Same way with Obama. Democrats were going against Obama. And then when you got a majority Republican Senate and a House, then it got tougher for them. So Democrats tend to fight for what they think is right for them or for the whole. Republicans tend to fight for party's sake. And that's why you don't see them kicking against Donald Trump.
That's good. That's good. Anyone else want to?
Yeah, I think Mayor Thomas is actually hitting on something, and I think it can be traced back deeper to racial lines. When you look at Republicans, especially those serving in high offices and mostly around the country, overwhelmingly they are white. When you look at Democrats, I think they are overwhelmingly a mixed bag of races, right? And so when you have groupthink like you do inside of the Republican Party, you tend to have a more consistent core group that maintains the status quo, as opposed to the Democrats, because they are racially diverse. They're all fighting for different things under the name of the Democratic banner. But I would say this traditionally, and I've had a question. I've asked some of my colleagues, why do they support what I see as racist candidates? Typically, they are Republican, but we have a few racist Democrats that get elected because they know that majority of African Americans vote Democratic, and they get in under the guise of being Democratic, but really they are Republicans in sheep clothing. I asked one of my colleagues, why do you vote for someone that's racist? And his answer was, if that candidate and I have 5 out of 8 things that we agree upon, that candidate closely aligns to my values. And it's not that I'm voting for a racist, I'm voting for someone who closely aligns to my values. And I said, but what about his racist rhetoric? He says, his racist rhetoric is something I can look past because we got these other 5 things in common.
Yeah.
And so I think that ability to compartmentalize, that ability to kind of segment their thoughts and their way of voting is why you typically see white Republicans and white Democrats differ. But traditionally, we have had more white Democrats to support the causes of African Americans. And so traditionally, African Americans vote more democratically because those Democrats support those of social responsibility and all those things that help people who have been disenfranchised by one way or the other.
So let me ask you, is there a party that being in a Christian, I hate to use the word Christian, but people that believe in the Bible, who kind of live their lives founded on the principles of the Bible, if all of us are reading from the same book, if we're all trying to live our lives from that Christian context, how is it that there are differences in how we vote on these these 2 parties? We're just looking at these 2 parties. Why is there a difference in those choices? Why is it a clear line between how people of color that believe in the Bible vote versus people that are not of our color in a Christian context, how they vote? Why is there such a great difference?
Well, to me, what I found just throughout history and around people is people tend to flock spiritually to whatever religion support their background. Now, without saying religious names,
Right.
people that support drinking and smoking tend to go to a religious background or religious church that does not condemn smoking and drinking. It's the same way with racism. It's the same way with way of life. People flock to organizations that support their way of living. Therefore, they don't do things necessarily under the guidelines of what we know to be the true living Word of God.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to do it according to what they're being taught and not reading for themselves and learning what thus saith the Lord, so to speak.
Okay.
And I believe it's just like Pastor Byron was saying. We kind of look at the points, or what can I, the points. Okay, they believe in and don't believe in abortions. They don't believe in the electric chair killing and stuff like that. That's the way we usually vote. Then we can look. Then they look past other things that they know they're not right in. But I'm like this. I'm like, it don't matter with me. It doesn't matter about Democrat, Republican. It's the best interest of for me. You know what I'm saying? I know some people they say, well, you know, we don't support the president because of, you know what I'm saying, how he believe or what he stand for, you know what I'm saying? But then some believe, okay, because he hold up a Bible. I'm just going to be me now, right?
Yeah, be you.
Because he hold the Bible up, right? You know what I'm saying? I can jump behind him, or he's against abortions. You know what I'm saying? We can jump behind him, but we got to look at the moral, the man himself. You know what I'm saying? That's what defines your character, is how you act, how you treat people. You know what I'm saying? Love and kindness have I drawn thee. That's what the scripture says. So I believe that's the way we need to get back to, find somebody that's with love and kindness, and then that's the person that we should get behind, you know, or the person we should back.
I think, Pastor Dent, I think you did an amazing job with that right there. And it shows you a term that I used on another show, the willful ignorance and the willful obtuseness that certain people can have, right? Because the same group that cries, no abortion, no abortion, no abortion, they say yes to lethal injection, yes to the death penalty, yes to murderous cops. These are the same. If you are against death of an unborn child, how can you compartmentalize the state-sanctioned death of an individual who, one, didn't have fair legal representation, two, may be innocent of the crime, three, may not have committed the crime at all, four, may have been a victim of racial judicial system, but you can still celebrate the state that legalizes and sanctions state death of a person, mostly of color, than a person, a woman, who says that I know within myself I cannot care for this child, right? And so I don't see how you can, I don't understand. And this is the real problem that I have with a certain segment of society, mostly the evangelicals, because they have this gift of willful ignorance. They have this gift to compartmentalize pieces of their reality to fit their narrative, and they go to bed at night knowing that they stopped an abortion, but they didn't stop a state-sanctioned murder of perceivably an innocent person. And so my frustration is really with those evangelicals. I have a sincere frustration with them, and I'm working on a slate of evangelicals to talk to so that we can have this dialogue. But I like Dr. King. Dr. King, in his letter from a Birmingham jail, he wrote that he could not understand how white evangelicals can see black Christians being brutalized by the state, by the police, having water hose sprayed on them, having dogs sit on them, having billy clubs mopped upside their head, all these injustices, and the white evangelicals sat there and did nothing. Yeah. He said that was the most disappointing thing about the whole. They're practicing Christian values. They're doing like Jesus said, turn the other cheek, and the evangelicals are sitting there. Well, they shouldn't be out there marching. One of my family's dear friends, I love her. She's a white lady. I love her. She's a great woman. And we were having a discussion about George Floyd. And she said, well, they said he was a bad guy. I want that to sink in. I want that to sink in. Yeah. Well, they said he was a bad guy. In other words, his death was meaningless because he was a bad guy. He deserved it. Yeah. And that's the spin. The correction, and she was corrected. Well, his rights were violated because he was not given due process in the court. Let the court determine his guilt, not a police officer with his knee and his hand in his pocket on the man's neck, pleading for his life, killing him. And so that's the kind of thinking that these evangelicals, because they're able to turn the station, they're able to scroll past it on Facebook, they can compartmentalize, they can shut it off, and they don't have to worry about it because it's not their reality. When in fact, if more evangelicals would stand up and declare racism to be real, we could get a lot further.
That's good. Anyone else want to comment on that?
But I believe just like this, in order for it to be that way, then racism is going to have to be talked about inside of the churches.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? This is one of the places where we don't talk about it quite often. You know what I'm saying? It's a separation between reality, you know what I'm saying? Can I say it just like that? Reality inside of the church, you know? So it's going to have to be talked about, and it's behind the pulpits, and I was raised up in where we didn't really discuss politics in church. It was a separation in the two, between the two, and I think, you know what I'm saying. So therefore we kind of stay away from that and lean towards, you know what I'm saying, love and preaching and heaven, you know what I'm saying, and stuff like that. But what we have to do is we're gonna have to get to a place where we begin to talk about racism in the churches and begin to speak about them.
So I want to ask you guys, why don't we speak on that topic of racism? I mean, when we see all the injustices, and we have other friends, we have family members that are not of color. We sometimes visit frequent churches that are not of African descent, and we interact with all of these people that are not of our color. But when it comes to racism, when it comes to race, when it comes to injustices, we don't talk about it at all amongst them. Is there a reason why we don't do it?
For one, I believe because God is love, right? So God sees no color. So that's the way we kind of keep it in that frame of mind. God is love, right? And no matter, and we was all created, God created us all equal, right? So and that's the frame we stick into. Is look, God is love. God loves us no matter what color we are, no matter what we have done. God still loves us all. And so I think that's just the frame of mind, and that's just the way we do it.
Okay, so I want to give a little pushback on that. If we're all brothers and sisters in the Lord Jesus Christ, no matter what your color is or anything like that, and if I see my brother being taken advantage of, if I see my brother being abused, if I see my brother being murdered in the streets, my natural brother, if I see that happening, it's just something in me that's going to make me go to his defense in some way, shape, form, or fashion. We don't see that in the Christian context. So can someone shed some light or give an answer as to why our quote-unquote white, so-called white brothers and sisters that proclaim Jesus as their Lord, they read from the same Bible that we read from, but when these killings, these murders, these lynches, and it's not just now, we have been dealing with this for a long time now. I mean, we went through the civil rights era. Even prior to then, we had the Puritans that were Christians, quote-unquote Christians, during the time of slavery. And no one came to the defense, or no one came to the plight of the black man when they were classifying us or legalizing the fact that we would only be 3/5 of a human being. Where were the Christians at that point, all the way up until now, if we're all brothers?
Well, let me say this. So, you know, the Quakers, the Puritans, they were abolitionists, and they were a small sect, and you know, history tells us that they were abolitionists. They fought. So I don't think we can say all, but I do understand the premise, right? There wasn't enough voices saying that slavery is wrong, classifying a man or a woman that are African descent as 3/5 a human is wrong. But I want to go back to that original point. So most of us come from a Pentecostal background. All these pastors that are here, elders that are here, we come from a Pentecostal background. Traditionally, Pentecostals were not they were not social justice speakers from their pulpit. Now there are some examples. Bishop Brazier in Chicago, he was certainly a civil rights activist. He supported Dr. King in his march in Chicago. He supported Reverend Jesse Jackson. Bishop David Ellis in Detroit was a social activist and did a lot for the community. And there are many, many more. But as a whole, and our leaders, Pastor Den and I, our pastors were not social activists. And so some of that is learned, right? And another piece of that is the mindset that Jesus will fix it. That, if we turn it over to Jesus, he'll right the wrong. And what we're learning and what we are seeing culturally, and when we study the scriptures, Jesus was an activist. Yeah. Jesus was a protester. Absolutely. Jesus was for social justice. Right. You could see he was against the status quo. Yeah. He was against classism that the Pharisees set up. Yes. He was against the spiritual aesthetics that the Sadducees set up. Absolutely. He was against he pledged against the Roman government to the extent he says, I'm gonna go so far, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar, and render unto God that which belongs to God. Yes. And so Jesus was an activist. He took the people out of the synagogue. That was an act of rebellion. That was an act of not being status quo. He taught from the seashores. He taught from Mount Olivet. And so all of those things, now that when we really look at Jesus and we look at his humanity, not so much his divinity, we see that Jesus was an activist. And I think what you're seeing now with forums like this, right, that we're using our pulpits to talk about social activism. We're using our pulpits to talk about social injustice. We're using our voices as ministers without compromising the gospel, because that's been the fear, right? If we talk about social justice, we're going to compromise the gospel. And so what God has allowed us to do is not compromise the gospel, but also use our bully pulpits to talk about social justice.
That's good. I want to kind of pivot a little bit on a couple of things. Primarily, we look at when we see our European brothers and sisters of European Americans, they are not as involved in the outcry for justice for people of color. From the church standpoint, we don't see them. They're very silent. But there is a group that is very vocal with the injustices that are happening to people of color. And that is one particular group, Black Lives Matter. And the context surrounding them doesn't necessarily fit a Christian context of how we grew up. Should Christians fight the fight or allow themselves to align with the Black Lives Movement in our protest towards justice and equality for black people? Anyone want to tackle that issue? Kind of loaded.
I don't see a problem lining up with Black Lives Matter if they're really fighting to save black lives.
Yeah, yeah.
And so the point has to be about saving black lives. letting everybody know that yes, Black lives does matter. And this is why they matter. So therefore, we want equal rights in education. We want to be treated fairly in employment.
Mm-hmm.
We want to have the same quality health care that others get. So then it's all right saying well, Black Lives Matter if they're really fighting to save Black lives. It's a difference in fighting to save Black lives and helping to take Black lives. So then if we're really fighting and wanting the world to really, really know that Black lives do matter, then we're not going to act any kind of way to put those same very Black lives behind bars for their actions.
Absolutely.
When they're out there protesting. So we've got to save Black lives. And by trying to save Black lives, then you're showing the world that Black lives really do matter. Because we're not out there being destructive. We're not tearing up stuff. We're not killing people. But we're marching for a cause. And we're going to keep beating the drum until you hear us. And so if we have to go all the way up to the White House, which some did, to get that message across. But you can get your message across is how you deliver the message.
That's good. And the reason I asked that is because some of the white evangelicals, they believe that the Black Lives Matter movement is anti-God, anti-Bible, anti-Christianity. And so when we hear that, it's almost sending a message that no one from a Christian standpoint should be aligning themselves with the Black Lives Matter movement. But, and as you were saying, if their agenda is to illuminate Black lives to matter, then we should follow them. Yeah, am I correct, guys? Is that something that we should be doing?
I agree.
I believe we ought to align with them as long as, like you said, they're doing it in a godly manner, loving. And I'm like this: we can follow them, but we cannot lose the message of Jesus Christ in the midst of all of our following and all of our doing. We still got to have love for our people. You know what I'm saying? For everybody. You know what I'm saying? So as long as it don't take you out of the box where you're getting away from Christ.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Christian is. It was Christ-like. So whatever we can move in that fashion, in that manner, and lead people to Christ by doing it. You know what I'm saying? We can't get that long. We don't get lost in the hype and the hoopla of everything that's going on, and we lose Christ. And when we start losing Christ and we start losing what we're called to do, and that's spread the gospel, which is the good news of Christ. So we can't get lost in everything else that's going on. We still gotta draw people unto Him. You know what I'm saying? Draw people unto Christ.
That's good. That's good. I want to make another term. Did you have some?
I was just gonna say that I think people heard that term, Black Lives Matter, and kind of piggyback a little bit off what the mayor said. They don't really understand the term. They just hear Black Lives Matter, but they don't understand what that means. And like the mayor was saying, it's sad that someone in the 4th grade at Mascoutah Elementary School is learning on the same curricular level as someone in East St. Louis in the 11th grade. You know, that's not saying that you care about the people that stay in East St. Louis, which is predominantly black. So this statement is huge. It's bigger than just murders.
Right.
Now, and murders are important. I mean, police brutality is horrible. It's senseless. But it don't stop there.
You know what? Black Lives Matter, the broader movement and its related organizations typically advocate against police violence toward black people, as well as for various other policy changes considered to be related to black liberation. And that's what Black Lives Matters is all about. The police violence, advocate against police violence against black people, as well as other policy changes, right? So anything else that conflates that, anything else that co-opts that, is not a part of the Black Lives Matter agenda, right? So we have to make sure that we are consistent on what Black Lives Matter really means. And I agree with Pastor and Mayor. Black Lives Matter, you have to be really careful when you say if you support Black Lives Matter. Because Black Lives Matter has a context beyond what their policy says, right? And so we have to be careful that we support the premise of Black Lives Matter, which means that Black Lives Matter should matter in the policy that they stated here, the advocacy against violence by police officers against black people and other policy changes, right?
Correct.
But we don't support everything that Black Lives Matter stands for, right? Because a lot of what Black Lives Matter is being co-opted by other groups, which will remain nameless, but other groups are attaching to the Black Lives Matter. And so what Deacon Carlos said about people not knowing what Black Lives Matters, see, for me, that's that willful ignorance showing up again. That how can you not understand this? You know how to get a piece of metal from the earth to the moon. Absolutely. You know how to get a piece of metal from the earth to Mars. And you can't understand this simple concept that Black Lives Matter, and you tell me blue lives matter. Well, police aren't blue. Right. Police are people. Right. So blue lives can't matter because blue ain't a color or a race, right?
Exactly.
All lives matter. Apparently not. Exactly. If we have to call out Black Lives Matter. So all lives don't matter. And I love this illustration that I saw on Instagram. It said, the black man said, "My house is on fire." And then a white woman said, "But what about my house?" Said, "What about it? Is it on fire?" "No, my house is on fire." Call the fire department. "But what about my house?" "Is your house on fire? Do you need a fireman?" Well, why do we need to care about your house when there's nothing wrong with your house, but my house is on fire? And that's really what we mean by Black Lives Matter. That no, it doesn't mean your house isn't important. It just means it's not important in this context because my house is on fire. And until we get my house, the fire put out of my house, we need all the resources because I got to live in my house. Exactly. Now, if my house burns down, then I become a ward of the state. Right. I become a recipient of welfare because I need the government to build me a new house or put me in housing. And then when you put me in housing, then I got all these other social ills that I got to deal with. So Black lives does matter, and I think the church has a responsibility to make that important. But I also charge evangelicals and whites who want to be willfully ignorant and willfully obtuse to the messaging that they don't understand. Why do Black lives matter? And then they rebut that by saying all lives matter. But if all lives matter, then we wouldn't need a need for Black lives to matter. Mayor.
Let me just give you a quick observation.
Mm-hmm. That was good.
The whole world saw the white officers with their knee on George Floyd's neck. And sure, their knee has been on our neck almost all our lives.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that we've got to attack and that we've got to get corrected is that there's a code of silence in blue. So we've got to try to break that code of silence where the black officers could see their white counterparts mistreating black men and be silent because there's that code there, okay? There's that code of silence where we all stick together.
Yeah, right.
And one thing you have to realize too is sometimes there's a reason why you see that white man react to a black man the way he is reacting to him. Mm-hmm. Sometimes he has witnessed that black officer dealing with his black brother in a very bad manner.
It gives him a pass.
When I was a police officer, my mother told me one day, she said, boy, if you're the only one complaining. Now, I worked in a department with blacks and whites, but I didn't like some of the things I saw from black and white. So I would complain about it. I didn't agree with it. Some people would tell me, say, you're too nice to be a police. Because I treated everybody the way I wanted to be treated. Mm-hmm. And so when I stopped being a police, I had no problem going around the same very people I was arresting. Not even have a gun on my side and not be afraid. Why? Because I treated everybody equally. I treated everybody fairly. And so the drug dealer that I had interaction with, he understood that it was my job that I was doing. But my mother told me, said, son, if you're the only one complaining, you need to leave it alone. Mm. And the reason being is because if I'm the only one complaining, then at some point those same men in blue gonna come up against me. Mm-hmm. Whether they black or white. Mm-hmm. So we've got to kill this code that's in these departments, where they're protecting one another, both black and white. Mm-hmm. And then once we break up that code of silence, then we can start dealing with some of the more racist issues that some of the whites are displaying among black brothers.
That's interesting that you bring that point out, because I think it kind of leads to another question that we're gonna save, but that fear of being different, even if different means being right, you know, we not only see that in that context, but we see that in our own lives, in our workplaces, where people won't speak out for the fear of losing their jobs or having certain things taken from them. There are a lot of people that comment and may text us and say they like what we're doing, but they will never come up here. They will never speak on it because they feel as though if they do say something, they're going to lose their jobs. They're going to have promotions taken from them. They're going to be I want to call it whiteballed when they go back to work, you know, those kind of things. That fear that a lot of people have that they won't speak out. But I want to ask this question to the panel, everyone up here. What has been your experience with, one, white police officers and two, black police officers? What has been your experience? Have they been the same? Have you noticed a difference in your interaction with them?
I can start it off. As for me, every police officer that I ran into has been different. I've dealt with some white police officers that were decent, and I dealt with some that soon as they ran my plates and knew where I stayed, they treated me accordingly, according to where I stayed. The only bad thing I didn't like was some of the people that became police officers because they were bullied in high school, and that was their way of retaliating. You know, and that's with both races. I mean, I just, you know, that shouldn't be your platform of retaliation when you say that you're there to protect and serve.
Absolutely. Anyone else?
My experience has been vastly different.
Okay.
Police officers, black, I felt respected. I didn't feel like they were afraid of me. I remember police officer, state trooper. I was speeding. He politely gave me a ticket.
You can respect that, though.
I can respect that. Yeah, I was speeding. White police officer, I was doing nothing. Nothing wrong. Everything in my car, no out tail light or anything. Pulled me over. Said I fit a description of somebody who was robbing a bank. And for the next 2 hours, there in Caseyville jail, I sat because after they ran my license and ran my information, turns out that I didn't have my emissions test done on my car, and there was a warrant for my arrest. But that wasn't the reason he stopped me. Right. He stopped me because I fit the description of somebody who had just committed a crime. And now I'm driving a 1978 Dodge Reliant. Now, if I'm going to rob a bank, I'm surely not going to rob it in a Dodge Reliant.
Yeah. Right.
And so my experience with black and white cops have been vastly different. And I have a nephew that's a police officer. I have a best friend that's a police officer in the city of St. Louis. I have guys I play basketball with that are police officers. I have members of our churches that serve in the police. And so it's not that. In fact, I had a sheriff text me yesterday and say, "Pastor, pray for the officers." And I prayed for the officers right there. Yeah. One of my good family friends, she's a sheriff in this county, and she's gonna come and be with us. So I have a lot of family and friends that are in law enforcement, and I will say that I am treated vastly different between white police officers and black police officers. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But to the extent that it's harassment, and I have never been harassed by a black police officer.
Yeah.
But I have been harassed by white police officers.
And I look at it like it's different between the two. I grew up in East St. Louis, and when I grew up there, it was yes sir, no sir to the police, and we kind of, you know what I'm saying, no interaction with them, and that's just how it was then, and that's how it is now. Now it's different. I talk to them now because of the profession I'm in. I have to talk to them and relate to them, but it's still the same. I'm on one side and they're on another side. But when I'm saying that they're on one side, I'm on another side. Let me make sure I make it plain. that I still, you know what I'm saying, with the way I grew up, you know what I'm saying, they come down the street, I look the other direction. That was because we didn't want the interaction with the police then, you know what I'm saying, because of the stories, the horror stories that we have heard from other people, you know, so therefore we just stay on one side of the street, they stay on another side of the street, you know what I'm saying, you see them coming, you go the opposite direction. I learned more back roads than anything because I'm trying to avoid them so I wouldn't have the problems out of them that some other people was having, you know, but now it's different, you know, because I have to, you know what I'm saying, talk to them and deal with them on a different level. But it's the same. I stay on my side and they stay on their side.
That's right. That's right.
And you know what I'm saying? I try to do everything that's right. You know what I'm saying? So I don't have to have a bad interaction with them or have a, you know. So therefore, I just try to stay on my side. They stay on their sides. You know. But like I said, they treat me fairly. I can't say I had no problems out of them because I stay away from them and try to stay out the way, in other words.
And you know what? That's conditioning too.
Yeah.
Right? That's conditioning. That's the condition of the African American man, that he knows his place when it comes to a police officer. Because I stay on my side, he stay on his side. But white Americans don't have that problem.
No, they wave at them.
No, they wave at him. And during this protest, I have seen white women stand up in the face of the police officer and chastise the police officer, and the police officer kowtowers to that chastisement. When one of us tried that, here comes the shield, here comes the billy club, here comes the get back, here comes the aggression, all of that, right? And so, quite frankly, I'm tired of knowing my place. My place is I'm a man, and I will be treated like a man. And I know something about police officers. They put on their pants one leg at a time, just like I do. They need 8 hours of sleep like I do. They eat food and drink water just like I do. They got mortgages and car notes just like I do. For me, there's nothing special about a police officer. There's nothing that I need to bow down. I'm not going to bow down to them. I'm going to give them the same level of respect they give me. If you want respect, give me respect. If you disrespect me, I'm going to disrespect you. And the reason that is because I don't believe that I need to be subservient to somebody whose my taxes are paying for your salary. I'm your boss. Yeah. My taxes pay your salary. Yeah. And so I'm not going to be one that kowtowers to the police. I don't know my place. My place is a man.
That's interesting that you say that, Pastor. I know I can spend the rest of the night discussing a lot of the interactions that I've had that my uncle has been a part of, my brother has been a part of, where it's just been just blatant injustice. But Pastor, you said something that made me think about in the profession that I'm in now. I'm frontline watching the protesting. By the way, people are still protesting. They are
This is the longest protest
and
since the Civil War.
Yeah, and I've seen a difference. When the people of color protest, they have a certain time limit of when they can be out there, and the police will come in and they will force them. They will make them disperse. They will throw the tear gas. We saw it during the Mike Brown incidents and all of that. At some point at night, they're going to make them pretty much go home. Tear gas, rubber bullets, those things. But what was interesting to me, as I'm out there, I saw the other group of people come out, and they were protesting just as loud, but the percentages changed, where it was 80% African Americans, 20% white. Now it was about 75 white Americans and about 25% black Americans. And so as they were protesting, the police came out to try to make them disperse. Well, they had a certain chant that resonated. They said, "These are our streets." And they stood there in the middle of that intersection, blocking off 4 ways of traffic for almost 3 hours. And the police did nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question I want to ask you guys is this. Is there a system at work against black people? Is there something that is ingrained in the system of America that is anti-black? Anyone want to answer that?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It's the same system that says when that black man walk in the room who's educated, meet all the requirements of the position, overly qualified, but then he's denied the job so he can go to a white counterpart. And then when he's denied that job by the system, then the system says the black brother don't want to work.
That's good.
When he's qualified, has the education, has the work experience. You see, they told us you go to school, you get education. When we got through getting our education, they said, no, now you need a little experience. Well, now how is the brother supposed to get experience if you won't hire?
Yeah.
How is he going to get a fair education if you are treating him differently? You're grading his papers, his research papers. You're grading his tests differently than you do his white brother or sister. So the system is set up to cause us to fail. And that's why I get very upset and angry when other brothers and sisters make it to a certain level and then they leave the other ones behind. Now they become greater and better than this one. Instead of grabbing him or her by the hand and saying, I'm going to take you up with me.
Yeah. See that a lot.
Yeah,
a lot.
I couldn't agree more, Mayor. We don't have a lot of tokens, but we got enough. We got enough, and I can remember times in college when I would write a paper for a white professor, and I have to rewrite it. And I take that same paper and give it to my black English professor with a PhD in English and get an A+. Right. I never could understand that dichotomy until I understood it was systematic racism. And it was intrinsic ignorance, a profound amount of ignorance, while the white professor did not understand my culture and didn't want to understand. This is the thing that really infuriates me. It's a lot of stuff infuriates me, but these are the things that infuriate me, right?
Yeah.
Is because we can merge and meld into their culture.
Exactly.
When you go to work, you don't say, "What's up, Doc?"
Right.
You don't say, "How we doing, homie?" What it be like? We don't say that. We say, "Good morning, Bob. Good morning. How are you?" We meld into their culture. But they never meld into our culture or meld into our experience. Right. We've always got to adapt to them. And so this is a time that we're living in where we have to be authentically us. And they have to learn how to accept us as we are and not lose ourselves when we are in their environments, right? I think about President Obama, highest level in the history of the United States. And he was authentically himself. He was authentic. He played basketball. When they had events at the White House, he bring in all black artists. He would give almost every engagement that he had somebody black of prominence there. Yeah. Diverse cultures all across. And President Obama made it clear that he wasn't going to wear a tie for non-business related activities, right? Mm-hmm. He was going to wear a blazer, a shirt, no tie, right? And guess what? Everybody else around him did the same thing. He changed the culture, right? And that's what I'm saying, that we have the ability, if we're bold enough, and I think we were saying that, some people aren't bold because they're afraid of what this or that one says. If you don't speak up now, you will never speak up. Right. There has not been a time in our history, most of us are just under that age of civil rights when it was coming to a head. There has not been a time in our lifetime where we've been this free to speak, to engage, and to challenge the culture. And so it's incumbent on all of us to challenge the culture now, right, wherever you are, to challenge the culture. Now, you have to be skillful when you challenge the culture, but you have to challenge the culture. Absolutely. Because the only way it's going to change is you have to demand that it change. And I want to say this. Some people said, oh, why are they rioting? Why are they looting? I personally don't have a problem with them rioting and looting. I don't have a problem with it. I'll tell you why. Because, as it's been stated before, rioting and looting, I think it was Dr. King that said it, yep, is the language of the unheard. Yeah. The man said, I can't breathe. Yeah. He did not hear that. Yeah. Yeah. He went right past that. Mm-hmm. But you're going to hear, let's take over the police department where this man was housed. Yeah. They heard that. Now, the only problem I have with rioting and looting is when you riot and loot in your own community. If you're going to riot and loot somewhere, riot and loot, and I ain't advocating that you riot and loot. I'm just saying, if you're going to riot and loot, don't do it in your own backyard, right? Because you're going to need that grocery store. You're going to need that gas station. You're going to need that advanced auto parts. Absolutely. And then, now that you burned all that down, you got to go to Brentwood, Ladue, Clayton to do all your stuff. Yeah. Now you gotta stay on your side. Now you gotta make sure your tail lights are in, your driver's license is up. Yep. When you had all of that at home, it was in walking distance. Yeah. So that's the only problem I have with rioting and looting, is that you tear up your own stuff. You don't cut off your nose to smite your face. Cut off somebody else's nose.
Bro, Pastor, I usually agree with everything you say. This a free. But hey, look, I'm like this. We still can't get to that place, though. You know what I'm saying? Because that's what they're expecting you to do. You know what I'm saying? They're expecting you to act a certain kind of way. They're expecting you to do that. You know what I'm saying? But we got to do it different. I think you said this is the longest protesting that's ever
in the history of this country
transpired, in the United States, right? Mm-hmm. So, but do you know why is that? Because the people are different than it was then. You know what I'm saying? So now it's more of the other races out there than it is us, for real. You know what I'm saying? Because they was raised up a different way when it was in a time when blacks and whites was marrying each other. You know what I'm saying? But then it wasn't. You know what I'm saying? You had to stay on, stay on your side of the street for real. But since now it's different, and so now we can fight a different kind of fight. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Because now we got assistance in our fighting. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So we got they're standing up for us, because they see the wrong that's been handed to us. You know, so what we got to do is we got to use this momentum and push it forward. You know what I'm saying? Keep on protesting, keep on teaching, keep on, but do it in a manner with no violence.
But here's the issue, right? See, the adversary uses violence to control us.
Yeah.
Point in case, that young woman and her daughter were leaving out the store, and the white man was bagging up, and apparently he didn't see him.
Right.
And so the lady tapped on the back of his trunk, right? She get out. At first, the white woman was calm. She's like, we're not racist, right. All of that. I saw the whole video, right? And then the lady was like, listen, he tried to hit me. Well, he didn't say he didn't try to hit him.
Right.
So that's all they were wanting. All they were wanting him to say is, I'm sorry. I didn't see you. But that arrogance, right? So when the woman, they pull off again, and he bagged back further into them. Yeah. So she hit it again. And then the white woman gets out with her gun drawn. And that simple act of pulling that gun is what they use to try to control us through violence. Well, that woman had another thing coming, because that black woman did not back down. She was not afraid of her having a gun. And what I'm saying is, when you don't hear me, right, it's like a bad relationship, and you wonder why the woman leaves. You say, you didn't hear me. Right. I told you all along, this is what I'm feeling. You didn't hear me. We have not been heard. Yeah. So the only time we can get your attention and get you to start to listen to us is rioting and looting. Now, once they started rioting and looting, you know what they said? Oh, they serious now. And so, wait a minute. Okay, don't burn up nothing else. Let's talk. Right. Let's sit down. And that's what I'm saying. Rioting and looting is not without a motive. Absolutely. It's not arbitrary. It's not just something crazed people do. But rioting and looting is a art to get the attention when words don't matter.
Brother Preacher, hold on one second. Brother Preacher,
Come on.
Now, what did you just say, though? You just said, right? You say, when you're in a relationship, they just leave because they're not being heard.
Right.
Okay. Point in case. Oh, now what if not now if they start throwing pots and pans, but because you ain't listening to me, it's not solving anything.
Well, you got my attention now. Wait a minute.
What do you want?
What you want? Wait a minute. You got my attention now.
That's right. Now you got the blue lights.
Hey, that's all right. Now, when I get out of jail, we gonna have this conversation.
But see, here's the thing with that. Once you see the violence of someone else, you're gonna do everything you can to stop that person from being violent. So when that same scenario, if your wife starts throwing stuff around the house, you gonna say, hold on, baby. Okay, let's talk. What do you want? Because whatever demands you have, I'm ready to meet them at this point.
I ain't been hearing it.
Because I don't want you to tear up my house. I don't want you to bust my televisions and all that kind of stuff. I don't want you tearing down no doors. I definitely don't want you calling the police. I don't want any of that. So let me do whatever I have to do to remedy this situation. And another thing is, historically, this nation was founded upon rioting and looting. That, you know, they set it up this way. That's part of the revolutionary part of this nation. That's what they did. They started burning up stuff. They started tearing down the symbols that represented their oppressor. And that's what we've always seen. Whenever there is an oppressor, the first thing that is attacked are the symbols. We're seeing it now, how they're tearing down all of these statues and all the things that represent oppression and takes them back to a historical point that was very, very horrific. They want to tear it up. So when you see people rioting and looting, it's really the voice of the unheard.
Well, like you were just saying, the problem with this nation, this world, this place where we live is us as black men, we're not seen to be equal.
That's right.
And that's the problem. Think about on the job. I don't know I've never been to your job. I put it like this. I've never been to your job. But you can go to work and somebody can pose a question and say, what's X plus Y? And you'll say Z. But your answer ain't good enough. They won't believe your answer until they go ask Billy the same question.
Right. Yeah.
And he say it's Z.
Yeah.
You know, so the problem is no matter what you do, what you say, is never enough. It's never complete.
Carlos, I love that example. You know what that is? That's marginalization and white privilege, right? And oftentimes we are, if not the smartest person in the room, one of the smartest persons in the room. And what happens is, because of their privilege, they always think they could correct something we're saying. Yeah. And they minimize and marginalize what we say. And so what I've learned to do in those meetings is, hold on. You almost have to go brother on them. Hold on. Yeah. Hold on. You have to call them out because intrinsically, genetically, DNA-ly, they think they are always right. And no one has ever challenged them or corrected them in their place. So I say, hold on. I said, you're marginalized my answer. You're marginalized. You're disrespecting me when you talk over the point I just made. So you have to have the courage, as I do, to stop them and make them aware because they may not be aware. And if you don't stop them from doing that every time you speak, now when you speak, they're going to email their disagreement, but they're not going to disagree with you openly because you have made them aware of their privilege and them marginalizing your answer. And so this is phenomenal, right? Because there are two things at play. The first thing that's at play is their sense of superiority.
That's it.
The second thing that's at play is our sense of inferiority.
Right. Yeah.
See, they have a sense of superiority, and in many cases, we have a sense of inferiority. And what we have to do is to develop the cool confidence in knowing that what I'm saying is accurate and I'm willing to back it and not feel inferior when they're talking.
Yeah.
Because they may not know that they're marginalizing us. They may. It's about 90% chance they know they are.
Absolutely.
And there's a 10% chance they may not know. But we have to stand. What I'm trying to say to us and everyone that's listening is the stage and the world is listening to people that look like us.
Right.
They are listening to us, and it's important and incumbent on us to speak up. It's like a marriage.
Yeah.
Speak now
or
forever hold your peace. And this is the moment to speak up.
Pastor, I kind of want to stay around this because the inferiority that a lot of, and I won't even call it that. Let's just call it fear. This fear that black people have that we can't speak up because of what we're going to lose and how they're going to treat us. They're going to take something from us. I call it a cowardness, but I see it sometimes. We don't know who we are in Christ Jesus, right? because we'll go to this job and we'll let this white person abuse us all day long. That's what I want to call it. Abuse us all day long, and we take it. But then when we leave that place and we go back to our families, if our wives say something to us, if she don't say hi to us the right way, we going off on her. If our children didn't straighten up the room the way that we asked them to, we beating them, and we wonder why we got all of these pent up family members say something to you the wrong way, and you got energy to beat them up and fight them and abuse them and tear your whole family up. But when you go to this job, you quiet. You let them walk over you. You let them take promotions from you. They make you train that one guy that just came off the street, the white kid off the street, train him and then promote him over you and make him your boss, and you don't say anything about that. You know, all of these things that we take because we have this inferiority complex, or we don't have our true identity in Christ Jesus to know that God is our Lord and he's going to provide our every need. So when you speak up with courage and boldness that even if you take this job from me, my God shall supply all of my needs according to his riches and glory. So I want y'all to talk about this cowardness that we see that goes on amongst men. We're not talking about the women because they have to deal with it too, but I want to deal with the men that are working a 9-to-5 job that are afraid. They are afraid to even speak up about the injustices that happen on their job. They're afraid to speak up and say that, man, that white police officer actually killed George Floyd. They're afraid to say it. But in a text message, in a group chat, they'll say, yeah, man, it was wrong what they did, but you won't even speak up on it. So I want you guys to kind of say something about that.
Well, I'm going to tell you, on the job, you have a sense of where you're going, where you want to go. And what's happened is most black men that speak up feel that they looked at as a radical. And when you look at it as a radical, you feel that you're not looked at for promotion or advancement because they're not looking for a radical. They're looking for somebody that's a yes man. So I've seen a lot of African Americans play the role and take down as a yes man, trying to work toward that position or that promotion that they think that they're going to get, and they never get because Billy's son came in and got it.
Yeah.
That has never even worked for the company.
Yeah. But they feel good long as they doing better than another brother, you know, that's a little bit lower than them. Well, I guess I'm all right, but I'll leave that for another discussion. Anyone else want to address this issue of working in the workplace under this type of...
I think it's working in the workplace under... It's like an individual has saw it go on for so long, and then when you get there, you see the same thing. You know what I'm saying? How someone came before you, or how they handled the situation. Then so you just do it the same way they did it when you on in the workplace. It's just like, you know, I know what we're talking about. It's just the same way they was taught on racism, how their parents taught them. It's the same way you seen your dad go to work and he just do whatever he got to do just to make the money for the family. It's the same way. Mm-hmm. But then we got to be different, and so we got to be a trendsetter ourselves, and then we got to start showing our children, hey, look, no, this ain't the way we do it. You know what I'm saying? We don't just have to put up with everything they dish out. You know what I'm saying? But what we got to do is we got to start showing them how to speak up for themselves and how a man is supposed to act. So we train the next generation on just like we was trained.
You know, I don't think it's cowardness. It may just be a lack of knowledge, and it may not be in their wheelhouse to be combative and confrontational. It just might be that person's demeanor. And I'm not going to knock a person for not taking the stance that I take, right? Because it takes courage while it's not cowardice. It does take courage to speak up. The second thing is, and to the point that you made, sometimes you just have to believe in what you're fighting for and believe that God has your back. Sometimes you have to be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and tell the king, I ain't going to waste your time. I'm not going to serve your God. I'm going to speak up. Sometimes you got to be like Esther. If I die, let me die. At least I tried. And so I think it's not cowardness, but it does take a certain amount of courage to speak up. And there are laws, and I think because we as African Americans, and I have been berated at work. I have been downgraded at work by a senior director. And thankfully, there was a white gentleman in the office that heard the senior director downgrading me. And that white gentleman went to HR and reported the senior director. HR called me in the office and said, why didn't you tell us this was happening? You have rights. And sometimes it's just a matter you don't know your rights and what you could and should report. But thankfully, God had a ram in the bush. And so oftentimes, God sets up people to advocate for you. When you don't have a voice, God will set up somebody to advocate for you. Mayor? Okay. And so I just, I think it takes a certain amount of courage to do it. And sometimes you have to throw caution to the wind to make a change. And I know today there are some things that I'm doing personally in my professional career that is very courageous. And DJ, I've talked to you about it.
Absolutely.
And I talked to Pastor Den about it. Very courageous conversation. Some things that I've said that, had I been in a different mindset, I would have been too cautious to do it.
Right.
But because I'm armed with the power of God, and I believe I'm being led by God, I'm doing some very courageous things. So I think it's individually based, and I think it's important that the individual checks with God before they make those type of moves. I don't think it's cowardness. I just think maybe it's a lack of knowledge, and it's not cowardness. They just don't have the courage to do it. And if they ask God, God will give them courage to do it.
Pastor, I want to push back just a little bit before we have to close. But when you see individuals that are hyper aggressive in outside the workplace, but very, very passive when it comes to the workplace, it seems to me that there is some level of fear, because we know, if we have, and I don't want to speak for everyone, I think everyone knows when you're being abused, when you're being taken advantage of. You know what I'm saying? Those things are happening to you, but you make the conscious decision not to address it for whatever reason. Man, they might take my job. They may stop me, as you said. They may stop me from getting the promotion that I want to get to. Let me get to the promotion first, then I'll try to address those issues. So I'm willing to, for lack of a better word, tuck my tail until I get to where I want to go, versus addressing it as soon as it happened. But on the flip side, we see in our own families, anger, aggression, all of these things, we wonder why. Is there something to be said about that when you're choosing, and we've said this, you've said it in Bible class, you don't yell and scream at your boss. So why do you yell and scream at home? Male or female, husband or wife. Why have we taken on this disposition where whenever we are engaged in that platform at work, or when we're engaged in those type of atmospheres, we are very, very passive? But at home, we are hyper aggressive. When we're with our families, we're hyper aggressive. You know, knock your head off. But this boss over here been abusing you for the past 30 years and you haven't said anything to him. So can anyone comment on that?
Me, myself, and I'm going to let the mayor speak. Me, myself, I think that anger and aggression is channeled. 9 times out of 10,